October 8, 1918. The Argonne Forest, France. The Great War is entering its final weeks, though nobody knows it yet. American forces are pushing through the Argonne as part of the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, the largest American operation of World War I. Corporal Alvin Cullum York of the 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Division, is positioned on a hillside overlooking a narrow valley. He's a reluctant soldier from the mountains of Tennessee, a former conscientious objector who overcame his religious doubts about killing to serve his country. York is armed with a Springfield M1903 rifle and has become one of the best shots in his regiment, though he's never spoken much about it. Below him, in the valley, something extraordinary is about to happen. A force of approximately 80 German soldiers is advancing in column formation across open ground, attempting to reinforce positions under American attack. They're confident, moving in daylight, believing themselves safe from American riflemen at this range, roughly 300 to 500 yards across the valley. They're wrong. Over the next 3 hours, York will use a marksmanship method learned not in the army, but from hunting turkeys in the Tennessee mountains. He'll kill 34 German soldiers with 34 shots. Not wounds. Kills. 1 shot, 1 kill. The method: shoot from back to front. This is that story. Alvin York was born in 1887 in Pall Mall, Tennessee, a tiny mountain community where hunting wasn't sport, it was survival. From childhood, York learned to shoot, not on military ranges but in the hardscrabble pursuit of food for his family. Turkey hunting taught him skills the army couldn't: extreme patience, precise distance estimation, and the ability to make every shot count because ammunition was expensive and missing meant your family went hungry. York became a crack shot, known throughout his county for his ability to hit targets at distances that seemed impossible with iron sights and a simple rifle. But York was also deeply religious. When drafted in 1917, he applied for conscientious objector status, citing his Christian beliefs against killing. His application was denied. His battalion commander and company commander spent hours discussing scripture with York, ultimately convincing him that sometimes war was necessary to protect the innocent. York accepted this logic but remained troubled. He would fight, but he wouldn't like it. By October 1918, York had been in France for months, participating in several engagements but without distinguishing himself particularly. He was a good soldier, reliable, skilled with his rifle, but quiet and unassuming. His officers knew he could shoot, but they didn't know how well. October 8, 1918, would change everything. The Meuse-Argonne offensive had been grinding forward since September 26. American forces were pushing German defenders back but at terrible cost. The fighting was brutal: trenches, machine guns, artillery, gas attacks. On October 8, York's battalion was tasked with capturing German positions on high ground. The plan required crossing difficult terrain while under fire. York's patrol, 17 men led by Sergeant Bernard Early, was sent to infiltrate behind German lines and attack machine gun positions from the rear. The patrol successfully worked around German defenses and surprised a German headquarters position, capturing a major, several junior officers, and a large group of enlisted men. But as they prepared to return with their prisoners, German machine guns on the hillside opened fire, killing or wounding 9 Americans, including all the NCOs. York, now the ranking soldier, took command. The survivors were pinned down. German reinforcements were approaching. York had to act. He positioned himself where he could see down into the valley where German soldiers were advancing to reinforce the machine gun positions. He had clear fields of fire. The Germans were moving in column formation, roughly 80 men stretched out along a narrow valley trail. It was a turkey shoot. Literally. In Tennessee, York hunted wild turkeys for food. Turkey hunting requires understanding bird behavior: when a flock is alarmed, they scatter. If you shoot the front bird first, the rest flee. But if you shoot the back bird first, the front birds don't realize what's happening. They keep walking. You can shoot them one by one from back to front before the flock panics. This seems simple, but it requires extreme discipline to not shoot the closest, easiest target first. Precise distance estimation to compensate for bullet drop across varying ranges. Fast target acquisition and shot execution before the situation develops. Calm under pressure, panic shooting wastes ammunition and spooks the prey. York had done this hundreds of times with turkeys. He'd never done it with human beings. But the tactical principle was identical. The German column advancing through the valley was walking like turkeys, single file, not expecting danger, focused forward. York made a decision that would define his legacy: he would shoot them like turkeys. From back to front. The last man in the column would die first. The front men would keep walking, unaware, until they too fell. It was cold-blooded, calculated, and devastatingly effective. Over the next 3 hours, York would prove that a skilled rifleman with a sound method could accomplish what seemed impossible. Modern snipers use range finders, ballistic calculators, and spotters to calculate distance. York had none of these. He had a 1903 Springfield rifle with iron sights and his mountain-bred eye. How did he estimate distance accurately enough to make killing shots at 300 to 500 yards? The method York learned in Tennessee: the human eye can estimate distance by comparing known sizes. York knew how tall a man was, roughly 5.5 to 6 feet. He knew how large that man would appear at different distances. At 100 yards, a man appears roughly the height of your thumbnail at arm's length. At 300 yards, a man appears roughly the height of a grain of rice at arm's length. At 500 yards, a man appears as a small dark shape, details indistinct. York would glance at a target, estimate distance based on apparent size, and then adjust his point of aim to compensate for bullet drop. The Springfield fired a .30-06 round. York knew from experience: at 100 yards, aim center mass, bullet hits center mass. At 300 yards, bullet drops approximately 12 inches. Aim at the head, hit center mass. At 500 yards, bullet drops approximately 50 inches. Aim significantly high or target must be elevated. These calculations, learned through thousands of rounds fired at game in the mountains, were automatic for York. He didn't think about them consciously, his body simply knew where to aim. York settled into position on the hillside, his Springfield resting on a log for stability. Below him, roughly 400 yards away, German soldiers were advancing in column through the valley. They were moving steadily, rifles slung, talking among themselves. They didn't know York was there. York identified the last man in the column, the rearmost soldier, furthest from York's position. This man would die first. York estimated the range, roughly 450 yards based on the soldier's apparent size. He adjusted his point of aim, elevating to compensate for bullet drop. He controlled his breathing: inhale, exhale halfway, hold. Squeeze the trigger gently. The rifle cracked. 450 yards away, the German soldier collapsed. The men ahead of him, 10, 20, 30 yards forward, didn't immediately realize what happened. They heard a shot, but shots were common on a battlefield. They assumed it was distant fighting. The column kept moving. York worked the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round. He acquired the next target, the new last man in the column. Same process: estimate range, adjust aim, control breathing, squeeze. The rifle cracked again. Another German fell. Now some of the column was becoming alarmed. They were looking around, trying to understand where the shots were coming from. But York's position, elevated, distant, concealed, was difficult to spot. And the men at the front of the column, furthest from the shooting, still hadn't realized the danger. They kept walking. York kept shooting. In later interviews, York described what went through his mind during those 3 hours. It wasn't bloodlust or hatred. It was cold calculation mixed with moral struggle. I was doing what I had to do, he said. Those boys were coming to kill my friends. I couldn't let that happen. So I shot them the way I'd shoot turkeys, calm, careful, one at a time. But he also admitted, every time I pulled that trigger, I asked God to forgive me. I didn't want to kill those boys. They had mothers and families same as me. But it was them or my friends. This psychological complexity, simultaneously executing men with ruthless efficiency while experiencing moral anguish about it, defined York's experience. He wasn't a psychopath enjoying killing. He was a deeply religious man forced by circumstance to do something he found morally troubling, and coping by focusing on the mechanical task at hand. The turkey hunting method helped psychologically. It gave York a familiar framework. This wasn't killing humans, it was a hunting problem with a solution he practiced thousands of times. Execute the method. Don't think about the targets as people. Later, there would be time for moral reckoning. During the shooting, there was only the method. This mental compartmentalization, separating the act from its moral weight, was how York survived psychologically. As York continued shooting from back to front, the German column's response was chaotic and ineffective. The problems the Germans faced, they couldn't locate York. His position was elevated, distant, and concealed. Muzzle flash was minimal. Sound echoed in the valley, making direction unclear. They couldn't coordinate a response. The men at the front of the column were furthest from the shooting and slowest to understand the danger. By the time they realized they were under fire, men at the back were already dead. They couldn't take effective cover. The valley offered limited concealment. Trees and rocks provided some protection, but movement to reach them exposed soldiers to York's fire. Some Germans tried to charge York's position, running uphill across 400+ yards of open ground. York shot them as they came. Others tried to return fire, but without knowing precisely where York was, they were shooting blind. Their rifles, designed for 300-yard combat, struggled at the range York was engaging from. A few Germans surrendered, waving white cloths and walking toward York with hands raised. York held his fire on these men. Later, German survivors described the experience as terrifying, an invisible enemy killing men one by one with seemingly perfect accuracy. They felt hunted, not fought. Which was exactly what was happening. York's weapon was the Springfield M1903, arguably the finest bolt-action military rifle of World War I. Its characteristics made York's feat possible: accuracy. The Springfield was exceptionally accurate at long range. In skilled hands, it could reliably hit man-sized targets at 500+ yards. Power. The .30-06 cartridge had excellent ballistics, flat trajectory, retained energy at distance, sufficient power to kill reliably even at extended ranges. Reliability. The bolt action was robust and functioned reliably even in adverse conditions. York's rifle worked flawlessly throughout the engagement. Sights. While only iron sights, the Springfield sights were well designed and allowed precise aiming when the shooter knew how to use them. York did. In contrast, most German soldiers carried Gur 98 rifles or carbine variants, comparable weapons but without the range advantage York achieved through his superior marksmanship and position. The Springfield's long barrel and powerful cartridge gave York reach the Germans couldn't match. But the rifle was only as good as the shooter. In average hands, the Springfield was a good infantry rifle. In York's hands, it was a precision instrument of death. York later said, "The rifle was fine. Best rifle I ever shot. But it don't matter what rifle you got if you can't shoot. I could shoot." That wasn't arrogance. It was simple truth. How do we know York killed 34 Germans specifically? The number comes from multiple sources. York's own account, he claimed approximately 30 to 35 kills during the Valley engagement. He was modest and uncertain about the exact count. His surviving patrol members, they witnessed York's shooting and estimated similar numbers. German records, captured after the engagement, German officers reported approximately 35 casualties in the valley from rifle fire before their force withdrew. Post-battle body recovery, American forces counted German dead in the valley area. The count matched York's estimates. The precision, 34 kills, may be slightly approximate. Some historians argue it could be 30 to 38. But all sources agree, York killed dozens of German soldiers in a single engagement through precision rifle fire. What makes this number extraordinary isn't just the total, machine gunners killed more in single engagements. It's the efficiency. 34 kills in approximately 3 hours means 1 kill every 5 to 6 minutes, sustained for 3 hours, at ranges of 300 to 500 yards, with iron sights, working a bolt-action rifle. The shot-to-kill ratio appears to have been nearly 1-to-1. York didn't spray bullets. He aimed, fired, killed. One shot, one kill. This is what separates marksmen from ordinary soldiers. After nearly 3 hours of relentless, accurate fire, the German force broke. The survivors, roughly 45 men from the original 80, withdrew in disorder. They'd lost nearly half their force to a single enemy rifleman they couldn't locate or suppress. The withdrawal wasn't orderly. It was panic. Men ran, abandoning equipment, discarding rifles, focused solely on escaping the invisible killer on the hillside. York continued firing at fleeing targets until they were out of effective range. Then, silence. The valley was littered with German dead and wounded. York's rifle barrel was hot from sustained firing. His shoulder was bruised from recoil. His ears rang from the rifle's report. But he was alive, and so were his remaining patrol members. York then faced another problem, the German machine gun positions that had pinned down his patrol initially. While York had been engaging the reinforcement column, the machine guns were still active. York couldn't leave his position without addressing them. What happened next became even more famous than the valley shooting. York began engaging the machine gun nests from his position. Using the same marksmanship that had devastated the column, he began picking off German machine gunners. Each time a gunner appeared to fire, York shot him. Eventually, the Germans recognized they were facing an impossibly skilled marksman. The machine gun positions surrendered. With the machine gun nests neutralized and the reinforcement column destroyed or scattered, York and his surviving patrol members faced a surreal situation. They'd started the day with 17 men, planning to capture a handful of German officers. After the valley engagement and machine gun fight, they had 8 surviving Americans, 9 killed or wounded earlier. 132 German prisoners, including 1 major and several junior officers. This absurd ratio, 8 Americans guarding 132 Germans, created a bizarre march back to American lines. York, still holding his rifle, walked at the head of the column of prisoners, occasionally looking back to ensure they were complying. The German major, humiliated by being captured by so few Americans, demanded to know how many soldiers had attacked his position. When told it was 8 men, and that one man, York, had killed or wounded over 50 Germans in the engagement, the major refused to believe it. York had the bodies to prove it. When York's column reached American lines, their own forces initially thought the prisoners were attacking. The ratio seemed impossible. Only when officers recognized York and his patrol members did they understand what had happened. The after-action report stunned commanders. 1 soldier had effectively destroyed a German company-strength force and captured more than 100 prisoners. It seemed impossible. But the evidence, bodies in the valley, surrendered machine gun positions, 132 prisoners, confirmed every detail. The U.S. Army was skeptical of York's reported accomplishments. A single soldier killing 30-plus enemies and capturing 132 prisoners sounded like propaganda or exaggeration. They investigated thoroughly. German prisoners were interrogated separately. Their accounts matched. An American marksman on the hillside had picked off their column systematically, killing dozens before they withdrew. Surviving American patrol members testified consistently about York's actions. The German major confirmed that his force had been destroyed by rifle fire from a single position before surrendering to avoid complete annihilation. German bodies in the valley were examined. Most showed single rifle wound, consistent with precision shooting rather than machine gun fire. Ballistic evidence matched the Springfield rifle York carried. York demonstrated his marksmanship for investigators. At 300 yards with iron sights, he consistently hit man-sized targets. His skill level supported the claimed accuracy. The conclusion: York's account was accurate. He had, through superior marksmanship and tactical method, achieved something unprecedented in modern warfare. The turkey hunting method, shoot from back to front, had worked exactly as York planned. The Army awarded York the Medal of Honor, the highest U.S. military decoration, along with numerous other honors. But for York, the recognition was complicated by his continuing moral struggle with what he'd done. Military historians analyzing York's Valley engagement identified several factors that made his method so effective: psychological surprise, the Germans expected frontal combat or machine gun fire, not precision shooting from distance. The back-to-front method exploited this expectation. Men at the front didn't realize they were being killed until it was too late. Range advantage: York engaged from beyond effective return fire range for most German soldiers. His superior marksmanship and elevated position gave him an asymmetric advantage. Concealment and position: York's hillside position was difficult to spot and provided excellent fields of fire. The Germans couldn't effectively suppress him because they couldn't locate him precisely. Ammunition discipline: by making nearly every shot count, York sustained the engagement for 3 hours without running out of ammunition. Spray-and-pray tactics would have depleted his ammunition quickly. Moral effect: each kill increased German panic and decreased their combat effectiveness. By the end, Germans were more focused on escaping than fighting. The method's weakness: it required extraordinary individual skill. An average marksman attempting the same thing would have failed. York's hunting background provided skills the army couldn't train. This is why York's feat, while studied, was never successfully replicated. You can teach tactics, but you can't quickly teach the instinctive distance estimation and shooting ability York developed over decades of subsistence hunting. While York was hailed as a hero, the psychological burden of killing 34+ men in 3 hours haunted him. In later life, York suffered from what we now recognize as PTSD, though it wasn't called that then. He experienced recurring nightmares about the valley, seeing the faces of men he'd killed. Guilt about the efficiency of his killing, the fact that he'd shot men like turkeys troubled him deeply. Difficulty reconciling his actions with his Christian faith, despite his commander's earlier assurances that defending others justified killing. Social pressure from his fame: everyone wanted to hear war stories, but York wanted to forget. York dealt with this by returning to Tennessee and farming, avoiding publicity when possible. Speaking publicly only about the importance of education and helping veterans, not about the glory of combat. Establishing a school for mountain children, turning his fame into something constructive. Refusing to profit from his war record, he turned down numerous lucrative offers to commercialize his story. When asked about the Valley engagement, York's standard response became, "I done what I had to do, and I'd do it again if needed. But I pray I never have to. Killing ain't something to be proud of, even when it's necessary." This moral complexity, pride in duty done but revulsion at what that duty required, defined York's post-war life. York's actions exposed a significant training gap in the U.S. Army. Most soldiers were trained for close-range combat, 100 to 300 yards, emphasizing volume of fire over precision. York's engagement occurred at 300 to 500 yards with precision shooting. The Army recognized several lessons: individual marksmanship training needed improvement. Many soldiers couldn't reliably hit man-sized targets beyond 300 yards. The value of long-range precision fire was underestimated in doctrine focused on machine guns and artillery. Rural soldiers with hunting backgrounds had valuable skills urban soldiers lacked. The Army should identify and utilize these skills. Tactical flexibility mattered. York's improvised turkey hunting method worked better than conventional tactics would have. However, implementing these lessons was difficult. The Army couldn't manufacture Alvin Yorks. His skill level took decades to develop through constant hunting. Training time and ammunition costs limited how much marksmanship training the Army could provide. Doctrine emphasized standardization, teaching everyone to be competent rather than developing a few exceptional marksmen. The result, York's feat was studied and admired but not systematically replicated. The U.S. military would eventually develop dedicated sniper programs, but this took decades. York's Valley engagement demonstrated what a single skilled rifleman could accomplish, but the Army couldn't easily produce more like him. Despite the Army's inability to replicate York's specific skills, his actions influenced American military marksmanship culture. The Marine Corps, already emphasizing rifle marksmanship, every Marine a rifleman, cited York's actions as validation of their training philosophy. Sniper programs in World War II and later conflicts studied York's engagement, learning principles like, position selection is as important as shooting skill. Psychological tactics, back-to-front shooting, multiply effectiveness. Patience and discipline are as important as accuracy. Ammunition conservation through precision shooting enables sustained operations. Modern long-range precision shooting owes a debt to York. The concept that a single skilled marksman can have strategic impact derives from examples like York's Valley engagement. Distance shooting techniques, estimating range, compensating for bullet drop, reading wind, are formalized versions of skills York learned informally. The psychological approach, staying calm, taking time between shots, treating combat as a technical problem, echoes York's turkey hunting mindset. Law enforcement and competitive shooters study York's engagement, the ability to perform under extreme pressure. Making accurate distance estimations without technology. Maintaining focus during prolonged engagements. York never set out to be a marksmanship icon. But his October 8, 1918, engagement became a case study in what individual skill and sound method can accomplish. Not everyone accepts the traditional York narrative uncritically. Some historians and researchers have raised questions. Could one man really kill 34+ enemies in 3 hours? Some argue the number must be exaggerated, perhaps including kills by other patrol members incorrectly attributed to York. However, multiple independent sources, German prisoners, American witnesses, body counts, support York's account. Did York actually use the back-to-front method? York claimed this in interviews, but some argue it may be post facto rationalization, a story that sounded better than, "I shot everyone I could see." However, German accounts of men being picked off from rear to front support York's claim. Was York the primary shooter, or did other patrol members contribute significantly? Some researchers argue York's surviving patrol members may have accounted for some kills, but York received credit as the senior soldier and most visible hero. This is possible but doesn't substantially change the narrative. Even if York personally killed 20 to 25 Germans instead of 34, the feat remains extraordinary. These controversies don't significantly undermine York's achievement but remind us that combat narratives, especially from events 100+ years ago, are never perfectly clear. What's undisputed, York led a patrol that killed or captured over 160 German soldiers. York was the primary shooter, and his marksmanship was exceptional by any standard. Could a soldier accomplish what York did in modern warfare? The answer is complicated. Factors that would make it easier. Modern scoped rifles are more accurate than York's iron-sighted Springfield. Range finders and ballistic calculators eliminate guesswork in distance estimation. Better training in long-range marksmanship produces more skilled shooters. Communication technology allows single shooters to coordinate with supporting elements. Factors that would make it harder. Modern infantry tactics emphasize dispersion. Troops don't bunch up like the German column did. Modern armies have much better counter-sniper capabilities, spotting scopes, acoustic sensors. Drones would locate a shooter like York quickly. Radio communication means a force under fire gets support faster. Artillery, air support, reinforcements. Body armor reduces the effectiveness of single-shot kills. The consensus among military historians, York's specific feat, 34 kills in 3 hours, is unlikely to be replicated in modern warfare. Not because modern soldiers can't shoot as well, they can, but because modern tactics and technology prevent the kind of target-rich environment York exploited. However, modern snipers have achieved comparable or higher kill counts over longer time periods by adapting to modern battlefield conditions. The principles York demonstrated, precision, patience, psychological tactics, remain valid. The specific circumstances that enabled his valley engagement no longer exist. Alvin York's October 8, 1918, engagement in the Argonne Forest demonstrates several timeless truths about warfare. Individual skill matters. Technology, tactics, and numbers are important, but a single highly skilled individual can have disproportionate impact. Unconventional methods work. York's turkey hunting technique, shoot from back to front, was never taught in military doctrine but proved devastatingly effective. Psychology is as important as marksmanship. York's method exploited human psychology, creating panic that multiplied his effectiveness beyond simple attrition. Moral complexity accompanies violence. York was a hero who killed efficiently, but he was also a religious man tormented by that killing. Both things were true. The method York used, shooting from back to front to prevent alarm spreading through the target group, was born from practical necessity in subsistence hunting. He adapted it to warfare because the tactical situation resembled turkey hunting, targets in a line, unaware of danger, vulnerable to systematic elimination if approached correctly. 34 Germans died because York treated them like turkeys. This sounds callous, even dehumanizing. But it was also tactically brilliant and strategically necessary. Those 34 men were coming to kill York's friends. York stopped them using the most effective method he knew. The distance method, careful range estimation, precise shot placement, disciplined ammunition use, transformed York from a soldier into a legend. He proved that one man, in the right position, with the right skills, using the right method, could accomplish what seemed impossible. The Valley engagement lasted 3 hours. The legend has lasted over a century. And the lesson remains: never underestimate what a skilled marksman with a sound method can accomplish.